think we're live now.
Yeah. Oh, whoa. It literally
cool.
just occurred to me to ask, like, are my tattoos inappropriate for the teens? Oh, well, that's fun. Zoom shows when things are live.
They're seeing it now.
They're seeing it now. You can't. I mean, you can't. You could theoretically change the channel, but.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here at our 8 p.m. chat with Meredith Russo, who won the Stonewall Award for If I Was Your Girl, which I have right here.
Whoa, that's Kira Conley on the cover. She's an amazing model. I've never gotten to meet her in real life. They don't let people who look like me within a 1 mile radius of people who look like her.
I was super curious when I was staring at this cover because she's gorgeous. Is she's trans girl?
Yes, it was very important to me when Flatiron bought the book. They brought me up to New York, which is where I live now. What a time to move to New York, the year of 2020. But right after Flatiron bought the book, they brought me up and we had a big meeting. And one of the things they asked was like, what are some ways that we can handle this book correctly, that we can make the trans community happy? And I was like, well, you could keep trans people involved at every step that it's possible to do so. And they did their level best to find a trans actress for the audiobook. We almost secured a couple, but they had other things that they ended up having to do, like other arrangements, and we got Kira Conley for the cover. And I was really
awesome.
Happy about it. Yeah.
I'm really happy about it too.
I think she looks just like Amanda. I hope she can act so that I hope she can act so that if the book ever gets made into a TV show or a movie, they can just hire her.
Cast her, yeah.
Yeah, because I love Hunter Schafer and Hari Neff, but I don't think either of them really looks like Amanda the way Kira does.
So in Birthday, did was it similar or?
Yes, but I haven't memorized the models' names.
Okay.
So I can't. But yes, the model who's portraying Morgan is a trans person.
That's awesome.
Yes.
It makes me happy.
I was really excited. It makes me happy. Because this is my thing. This is why I get hung up on representation, right? Is people get mad about the principle of Eddie Redmayne playing, for example, Lily Elba in The Danish Girl, which is not a good film. People get mad about the principle, and my thing is, yeah, fine. Well, I guess it's because I always come back to being, and it's 2020, we're just laying it all out. I always come back to being kind of like a radical leftist materialist who only thinks in terms of economics, but I can't eat my principles, and neither can other trans people. And so the problem isn't Eddie Redmayne broke some social rule by portraying a trans person. The problem is there are trans actors and actresses who could have used that money, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I like it. Is less we've supplied enough mana by doing these steps, and more here are here's some trans people I got work,
it would be an inconvenience to actually use somebody who would fit this because that's their experience. That doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah, so, sometimes hiring people from underserved communities is inconvenient.
Yeah. Well, you need to do it.
But you got to do it.
Yeah.
This is part of the social contract, babes. If you're gonna control capital and access to resources, then you're gonna have to make some sacrifices in the pursuit of a more equitable society.
Definitely. So I don't think we actually told everybody the synopsis. So
no.
Can you give us a little synopsis if it was your girl?
We absolutely can. And we just took off full steam ahead because teens. I met your humble librarian in Memphis at a convention, and it was a lovely time. But so the synopsis of If I Was Your Girl is the vibe synopsis, I guess, would be that it is a John Hughes movie a la Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles, but set in Appalachia and queer and trans. In a more general term, it is a coming-of-age romance which deals with issues of class, gender identity, trauma, and sexuality in rural Appalachian mountain communities. The plot synopsis is that Amanda, who is a transgender girl who is 18 and has missed out on the last 2 years of school due to pretty severe school bullying, has now experienced some pretty severe, just in general, assault in her suburb of Atlanta. And her mom, sort of in a darker version of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, says, "Well, look at you. It's just because people in this town know that you are trans, and you're lucky enough to like pass. And so I'm going to send you to live with your estranged father so that you can just like complete your last year of high school in person. You're gonna go live with your estranged father in this isolated little town in the middle of nowhere." Her plan is to show, because she's just riddled with trauma, her plan is to show up and keep her head down and get out of school and then just move somewhere else and like start her life over. But she's a pretty mysterious new girl in a town where not much happens, and so friends, possibly enemies, and possibly a love interest all start to park themselves in her life. And the book is about her negotiating the tension between keeping herself safe and being like fully emotionally available to the people around her as a trans person in a dangerous situation.
I love that, how you phrase that, because that's kind of what I was going with. It's like she kept kind of being reminded, and like one of the characters, B, who reveals her truth. Oh, really?
Oh yeah, B is based on what I was like when I was a teenager. It's so funny. People are always like, "Was If I Was Your Girl autobiographical?" And I'm like, yeah, because B is based on like what I would have been like if I were a cis girl.
Like I would totally want to be friends with B. I would not be B though. Who would I be? Oh, that's so hard. I definitely
Chloe or Anna.
I could be Chloe. I would not be an Anna.
Anna means well. Anna means well, and she has a good heart. I like Anna. I like all of these characters except for Parker.
Yeah. I don't think we know enough about Layla, but I could be a Layla maybe.
There was some Layla material that was cut out that I was sad about ending up cutting out just from page counts. The way I originally envisioned her was that, well, not a lot of people know this, but East Tennessee is home to a bunch of power plants, and the nuclear reactor where the nuclear material for the Manhattan Project was partially enriched, and there's still like a Sequoia nuclear plant that provides a lot of jobs. And I was gonna have Layla's family be Iranian immigrants, and and because all of the characters to one degree or another are hiding something, and this is like one of the themes. All the characters are hiding something from everyone. And originally in the car ride after the girls kind of save Amanda near the end, Layla was gonna tell Amanda about, you know, her family being Muslim and feeling scared to talk about it because of where they lived and but I think we ended up just cutting it for time.
Yeah.
There were too many B and C and D plots. But so then now you know some more things about Layla.
That's really interesting. I love hearing about that. Actually, so we just talked to Sadie, and she was telling me about her book that originally, like, one of the characters I loved died, and I'm like, well, I'm glad he didn't. So.
Oh no. Oh no.
It was like a month before it was supposed to publish, and I was like, no, we have to fix this. There's too much tragedy in this book.
Well, I'm glad for you that it was fixed.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about this because this, when I was reading your note from the author, because you said, I have in some ways cleaved to stereotypes and even bent rules to make Amanda's transness as unchallenging to normative assumptions as possible. And then you explain it a little bit, but I kind of want you to explain it to the teens. So,
right.
Not that there's like problems with it, sure, but like, but what you mean by that?
These also are choices that I put a lot of thought into and that I mulled over a lot when I was making them. And they're not choices. They're not all choices I necessarily would make now, although I see the utility of them in retrospect, and it's nice to kind of build off of them to make increasingly more challenging trans material.
Yeah.
But like, so Amanda is skinny.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I would say that for the majority, there have been times in my life where I was thin. Mostly when I was not well emotionally, like when dysphoria was very hard on me when I was a teenager, and then there was a period in Boston where I was just like poor and my mental health was not well taken care of. But otherwise, I have ranged pretty solidly from. Otherwise, I have been pretty solidly like wearing larger sizes to wearing torrid sizes, and I'm newer because I was taught a lot of self-hatred for my body. I'm newer to a lot of like fat liberation discourse, but I think the appropriate thing to call myself for most of my life would be fat, which is fine. Which I learned in the last like 5 years was fine, and that took a lot of work. But yeah, I've been fat most of my life. I am a lesbian. Amanda is straight. Amanda is like white, like even whiter than I am, in the sense that like I'm Jewish. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, she's she gets SRS as like a teenager. She gets like bottom surgery as a teenager, which
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of anyone doing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she like passes pretty like unconditionally as a cis girl.
Mm-hmm.
Her family has enough money that money is not a problem in her life.
Yeah, I did
Um,
notice that because one of the things when I read books is if anybody is struggling financially, like I can't get over that. Like I keep thinking that throughout the book, like, oh my God, when is their situation going to change? Are they going to be able to pay their bills? I have
how'd
like
you
anxiety for them.
how'd you feel about birthday? I guess we'll get there eventually. And
Oh
how'd you
my
feel?
God,
And how'd you
I
feel?
wanted to
How'd you
like,
feel about Grant? Because Grant's family's not doing great. But yeah,
yeah, I
and
know, I
I've
wanted to adopt them and take care of
yeah,
them.
Amanda's family is a family of means, and I've been poor most of my life. So she's really like, in a lot of ways, she's like, I have a different example that I go to for adults, which is like Orange is the New Black. I don't know if teens are watching Orange is the New Black. Um, but she's like I really wanted to use her as a Trojan horse to present people with like a perfectly normative, perfectly
Mm-hmm.
unobjectionable, again, to go back to 16 Candles, like a Molly Ringwald of a trans girl that like no
Right.
one could have any reasonable objections to, because like bad faith actors always point to the messier parts of individual members of minorities that they don't like as like
Yeah.
hypotheticals for why these people should be rejected. And I wanted to show someone who they could not reject without making it clear where their biases were.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But
There's a,
and
yeah, it's
she's
like there's
also
nothing objectionable about
incredibly
her.
binary, right? She's has an
Mm-hmm.
incredibly binary gender, and that also is not necessary at all for recognition or for receiving love or for like being free from assault or anything.
Yeah, I think, let's see. I actually read Birthday before I read If I Was Your Girl. Um, and I was I was actually nervous before I had talked to you because I was like worried that about the like any sort of abuse
Mm-hmm.
in If I Was Your Girl, because I mean, I'll read it, but like I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need a warning. I just kind of want to know what I'm getting into. So,
I
um,
my brain's riddled with trauma. I love trigger warnings, and I thought long and hard about putting trigger warnings in the books themselves, but then I remembered
yeah,
that there are websites like doesthedogdie.com, and I was like, because a trigger warning is also in some ways a spoiler warning, and for people to whom it is very relevant, like if I'm gonna watch a movie I will usually check like, does the dog die, or like some other like trigger warning websites to see if.
Yeah. I love how it ended though, so I'm gonna read this.
Okay.
Either way, I realized I wasn't sorry I existed anymore. I deserved to live. I deserved to find love. I knew now, I believed now that I deserve to be loved. And like I just read that and I was like, that's what I want teens to get out of this book, is that whatever their difference is like they deserve those things too.
Yeah, and it's a little corny, right? And I felt self-conscious
It
when I
is,
originally
but
wrote it, and I
it's a
feel
true
self-conscious now.
message.
But I think it's important for one specific reason, and that is most of the time with trans literature, you get either like adult, kind of like gritty novels, like the
Yeah.
your teens, so don't look them up, like the topside press novels, like Nevada and A Safe Girl to Love and like Sybil Lamb
Yeah.
stuff. And otherwise you get, at least from books, and otherwise you get like TV shows and movies and books and stuff that are like sci-fi and fantasy, or where like the character is maybe trans, but it's like mentioned offhandedly. Oh, this is like a little thing about me, whatever. And they go on with their lives and it never comes up. And they're just kind of, or like people are just like headcanoning trans characters. And there's the one can be exhausting and the other is not very satisfying for me at all. And there's a middle ground between the two where there is a recognition of the trauma and difficulty and oppression that these characters are living with, but we still let them have a happy ending. We still let them have a happy, largely uncomplicated ending, right? And that's what I wanted to do, and I hope I did successfully.
Well, but the ending is still like a question. So are you one of those people that like or I should say one of those authors that like are kind of annoyed when people ask you, but like what happened after, or because you want them to imagine it themselves, or like do you answer it because you imagine it a certain way?
So I'm not annoyed by that question. I think that the people who ask that question are very annoyed by me because I got my start writing fan fiction. And so what I do is I turn to them and I say, I don't know, I didn't write that part. What do you think? You should write fan fiction and send it to me so that I can see what happens to these characters after the book. And then they're like, but I don't want to do that. I want you to tell me. And the thing is, so that part is nebulous. I still think If I Was Your Girl has a happy but complicated ending because I'm gonna let.
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree. It's happy.
I'm gonna let the teens in on a little. I'm gonna let the teens in on a little secret. First of all, there was zero chance I was going to write a book where like the main moral dilemma was where the main moral dilemma turned out in the end to be whether the all-American boy would accept Amanda as a girl. Zero chance I was going to write that book. And also, the odds are that you will not marry your high school sweetheart. And so what Amanda has won by the end of the book is much more valuable than, and let's be real, Grant does have abs. He's hot. But what Amanda has won by the end of the book is much more valuable than a boyfriend who's like a solid 8.5, 9. Yeah.
Well, I was like, because I was kind of thinking about it, and I always like happy ending, but honestly, I'm like, I want to say that they become friends again and they're good friends, but the romantic part of their relationship doesn't work. And in part because the distance and the getting older and moving on. Because I don't know, I don't think it's necessary. I think they're kind of grown past each other. So that's what I imagine. But I do think it's a happy ending because she's able to go back and like, finish out her year, and she has friends and she doesn't have to worry about like the harassment she had when she was living in Atlanta. So those are my thoughts.
I think those are great. And I think it's like The Legend of Zelda. There's a branching timeline. There is a timeline in which they are high school sweethearts and they absolutely live the dream. And I have thought about it, and I will never tell anyone what that timeline is like because I want someone else to come up with their own thing. And I love that you did.
Oh, Oh, I always do.
Great. Fan fiction is so fun. I don't really write
Yeah.
I don't really write it anymore. I still read it.
I only create it in my mind. I don't really have time to write it.
I'm replaying the Metal Gear Solid series on my Twitch channel, and I've gotten back into reading like Otacon and Solid Snake fan fiction, and that and Luke Skywalker and Han Solo are still my like most important ships of all time.
That's awesome. I like that.
Thank you.
Those are good ships. Oh, we have a question from a teen on our Facebook page. It says,
yes.
what inspires you to write books?
What inspires me to write books is that. So one of the things that inspires me to write books that I'm thinking about the most lately is that I am neurodivergent, and I have a very difficult time understanding other people. I am vexed, and that also my romantic life has been largely rocky, for trans reasons and other reasons. So I think I am vexed by romance and by the interiority of other human beings. And one of the ways that I work out my anxieties in those realms is through running simulations of the inside of other people's heads and of romantic situations through my art.
I like it.
And so, yeah, I think that's one of the inspirations. And to be more specific, is usually each book I write has like some styles that it's drawing from, like, and that's not often the same from book to book. If I Was Your Girl was like channeling a lot of like coming of age, like kind of comedies that I grew up with in the 80s and 90s. Birthday is channeling a lot of like slice of life manga. I've had a couple of people like clap and feel proud of themselves for figuring it out when I said that. So I guess it came through. And the next one is like I'm channeling like the next book I'm channeling like a combination of a fairy tale and those like movies where the kids have to save the rec center or whatever in their community.
Oh, cool.
But the rec center in this case is like a queer land project in the mountains in Tennessee. Do we have
a release date on that project? No.
No, I wish.
Well, I'm excited for when it comes out. So
Me
yeah,
too.
we should talk about Birthday, because this is the first one I read, and it just made like a huge impact on me, and like I felt it in my heart, because I was I don't know, I was like, I want to adopt Morgan, and I love Morgan so much.
I love Morgan a lot.
I wish I could like fix your despair, because that just hit me. So
I mean, that's one of the things that was important for me to work through with Morgan, because when I was looking through the wreckage of my life, I realized that for the time in like the early 2000s and for the location of Southeast Tennessee, which is where I grew up, I had liberal parents, about as liberal as you could expect for the area. My grandfather was gay and out. I got into a magnet school for the creative arts. And I was looking back and I was like, I knew that I was trans. Like, I didn't necessarily know to describe it that way, but I knew since I was a little kid, and it's fine if you didn't. But
yeah,
I did. But I just didn't know how to say, and I knew that I was miserable. I didn't know how to say it, and I didn't trust anyone around me with the information. And I spent a long time looking back and going like, why? I could have saved myself so much trouble.
Yeah. I like so many times he almost tells Eric or she almost tells Eric, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like do it. Like I feel like you can trust Eric, but there's always the chance that like Eric won't be that person that you can trust. And so like I totally get that, but it's just like breaking my heart, because and then it was like such relief that Eric was so accepting. I was like, oh thank God.
Well,
like,
yeah,
don't make me hurt him.
And this is the thing, right? Is that Eric and Morgan's dad, sort of like you were going to save Morgan from her despair, is like one of the things I realized looking back is that nobody could have saved me from my despair, outside of a world in which I had not been traumatized by bullying early in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and a world in which I had not received basically constant messages that trans women are either like jokes or corpses waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And the thing about like is Eric going to accept her? Is that little trick I told you? Is like, I'm never gonna write a book where
Mm-hmm.
the tension is, will the boy be cool with it? And that was actually the origin of the dual perspective thing in
Mm-hmm.
Birthday. Was I
Yeah.
was like, I want it to be clear from the jump. I want it to be clear from page 1 of Eric's narration that like he might be weirded out. He might not know how to react. He might not be attracted to her, I guess. But I want it to be clear from the jump that Eric is going to remain friends with Morgan when she comes out. That like
Yeah.
Morgan's problem is not whether Eric will be down, and to a lesser extent
Mm-hmm.
whether her dad will be down. Morgan's problem is that there is an abalone shell of pain that has grown around her heart that she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know how to open back up.
Yeah.
Right? And self-actualize.
So I want to talk about so Morgan's mother dies when she's young, and she has these videos, and I honestly think that these videos are more traumatizing than helpful, because the videos, like, she's like, oh, I miss my son, and which just that broke my heart. I was like, stop watching the videos, turn off the videos. Like, I get
Yeah,
why you watch them, because it's your mom and she made them for you, but oh, that was also heartbreaking for
it's
me.
really hard, and those were inspired by right around the time I transitioned. I wasn't talking to my mom for a lot of complicated reasons. And while I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
talking to her, she survived breast cancer. And and I kind of left her life in my early 20s as her son, and came back into her life in her mid 20s post cancer as her daughter. And we had a lot of catching
Mm-hmm.
up and a lot of growing and learning to do. And there were uh, and my paternal grandma passed, and missed um I missed like the last year of her life from just like not being able to face her with the reality of like having transitioned. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was just channeling a lot of those feelings of regret, right? Because especially with my grandma, I had this feel I had this feeling of like, what if my mom had died? You know, and
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
the last thing she'd ever known of me was before, or like thinking about, well, the last time my grandma ever saw me, it was as her grandson. And working through that,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to come to the other end, right? You don't have to have a relationship with your
Right.
family
Right.
if your family is abusive or
Especially,
bad
yeah,
or whatever.
absolutely.
But
Mm-hmm.
if you are the sort of person who wants to, um,
Mm-hmm.
and you transition, and hopefully your family comes around, there is still a lot of I was always a woman, but I was pretending to be a man for a long time. And even now, hanging out with my family, it feels like the ghost of someone who never existed is sometimes just kind of like
Yeah.
haunting these spaces and these relationships in a way that I wanted to. Yeah, and I'm glad you grokked that it's like not great for Morgan's mental health to be exposing herself to this, because I've seen like videos
Yeah.
where people are like, this mom died and left a video for all of her kids' birthdays. And every time I see that, I'm like, that seems monstrous. That seems like you have chosen to short circuit your child's grieving process, because grieving is
Yeah.
like supposed to happen a certain way. And if it doesn't happen a certain way, it's like deeply traumatizing and it'll like derail your whole life. And you've just decided like, no, I'm going to keep like an awful ghost of relative past. I'm just gonna keep
Yeah.
showing up every year.
But I think for people that don't have trans friends or family or trans people in their life, they kind of don't understand that mourning of family, of like the person that they used to know, you know, because
Yeah.
you are a different person when you transition. So
Yeah.
I like how that was. I really love how you described that. And If I Was Your Girl, when Amanda was talking to Amanda, found her mom crying, and her mom was looking at pictures and just like, oh, I miss my son. But then she was saying, like I kind of mourn the loss of you at any age. So like
Mhm.
when you, in 5 years, I'm going to mourn the loss of, my 18-year-old daughter. So just, that's because your kids grow up and you think of them a certain way, and so you're going to have that regardless. But it is kind of like you're going to miss a kid that you remember differently.
Yeah, no, I had so many parents ask me like, but I miss my blank. I miss my son or my daughter, and it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
hasn't hasn't the whole experience of parenthood been the moment that this little person learned to say no and to stand up and to walk under their own power? Hasn't this is an anime deep cut. If anybody's ever seen Dragon Ball Z Abridged on YouTube, there's a joke where Gohan, the son of the main character, they rib the fact that the protagonist, who's the dad, is like always gone. And so when Gohan thinks of his dad, he just thinks of a ghost saying, "Bye, son." But like to a certain extent, isn't your experience with your child, the moment the child learns to talk and to walk, just a nonstop experience of every time you get used to what this person is like, that version of that person goes, "Bye, mom," and like disappears, and you're replaced with like a new little gremlin that you have to get used to.
Yeah.
And this is no different. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is uh, it's 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 as true with human beings as it is with rivers, that you can never cross the same river twice, and you can never be the same person 2 days in a row. Um, it's just that this change is one. It, it's just that, and here I'm going to get a little political. We live in a society where patriarchy and white supremacy have had a stranglehold on all of us for centuries, and are
Mm-hmm.
largely intertwined. Um, and gender is essential to the grammar of fascism, in a way that makes people alarmed when uh, those lines are stepped outside of. And I think that they are misattributing like the fear of deviance within an essentially fascist society with mourning. But I do my best to be patient, because I've been a no fun boo boo radical leftist for most of my life. So I've gotten pretty good at like chilling and being like, here, you should have some tea and we can like talk about this, instead of being like, did you know that there's a cop living inside of your head, Martha? Be nice to your child.
All right. So I love asking authors this question. I ask everyone, what advice would you give to your teenage self? So if you now could go back and talk to your teenage self, what would you say?
Um, well, I don't know if you've ever heard of a band called Animal Collective, but there's a band called
I've
Animal
heard that.
Collective,
I've heard of them. I haven't heard any of their music though.
and they have a song, and the song
Mm-hmm.
is called, and listen, teens don't necessarily follow my advice. They have a song, and the song is called College. And the song is very short, and it starts with them chanting, and then it's just them very gently chanting, "You don't have to go to college." Like, obviously, some of the advice I would give to myself is like, here, look, if nobody's gonna support you and like help you get hormones, they'll make you happy, and like you can just like get a job and like start buying girl clothes from the Goodwill, and your parents won't take them away because they're kind of pushovers. And like, if nobody's going to give you hormones, here's a Turkish website you could go to and like semi legally buy them, like that kind of advice. That's all the
Right.
boring. And like, because being asked this question when you're trans is sort of like, well, there's one thing I would
Yeah.
do, but the other thing I would do is just like not go to college. Not go to college, because I think that student debt crisis is out of control and is if that particular grenade happens to blow this year while we're already facing 30 to 35 million evictions and a pandemic and everything else that's going on.
I know. Nobody can see the future anymore. We don't really know where things are going.
If that grenade happens to blow, we're done. And it's wildly irresponsible that it was allowed to get to this point. And the student debt, I think that the things that I learned were very valuable, but that they weren't worth the student debt that I took on. And I got my first contact with an agent while I was in college, and I didn't really get the contact through any of my college resources. So it's not like I don't value the time that I spent in college. It's more that like I could have self-actualized faster and in more ways and spent more time just kind of seeing the world and like writing and figuring things out without going tremendously into debt. So
that's completely fair.
I would brush my teeth more. I would tell my teenage self, like, you have, like, I know that we're poor, but we do have insurance, and you have to like really insist that your parents get you in therapy because you're bonkers to be sensitive. I'm neurodivergent. I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, I guess that would be it. Don't go to college, get therapy. Here's some websites you can buy hormones from. Here's what dress size you are. Here's how to find a dress that blouses at the waist so you can maybe like appear to have more hips than you really do. That's all of it, yeah.
All right, we have one final question, and it's, do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
The advice that I have for aspiring writers, is do not only read in the genre that you're going to produce. And there are going to be a lot of people who are going to tell you, if you're going to write YA and you haven't read 1,000 YA books, get out of here. I think that genre fiction is fine in the sense that books that are about teens or spaceships or dragons or ghosts or murderers or any combination thereof are fine. Lowercase g genre fiction. Uppercase G genre fiction is just kind of like trite and boring and doesn't have a lot to say artistically, and uppercase G genre fiction is what happens when you get like in the 70s a bunch of writers who only read Stephen King. And I don't know. Well, Stephen King was very popular in the 70s and the 80s, and there were a lot of people who kind of like only read Stephen King and King's horror contemporaries, and they produced books that were really just like rearranging plot structures and like character themes and like tropes, but like not really doing anything new. And I would say that you need to be constantly watching TV shows, watching movies, reading books, reading comics, reading nonfiction, reading novels, going out and having real world experiences that are outside of what you would normally even want to do. You would normally even be inclined to. You have to push at the boundaries of your perceptual vocabulary, because you don't know what you don't know. And the more ideas you are exposed to and the more styles you pick apart and see what you like in, and the more things you experience in the real world and kinds of people you meet and dialects of language you hear, the more kind of vibrant and alive and immediate your fiction will be.
I agree. Absolutely.
And then you can write better stories about people kissing with swords.
Some people would say that librarians, they know everything, and I'm like, well, we don't know everything, but we know generally how to find information about anything.
Which is as good as knowing everything.
Yeah. But I feel like I fell into librarianship because I like to know something about everything. Mm-hmm. So there are a few things that I have deep knowledge of, but I can gravitate and have interest in anything. So
I don't think dilettante is an insult. I think it's a perfectly fine thing to be. I think that most good writers, and apparently all librarians, are dilettantes.
Yeah.
You got to know little about a lot of things.
All right, well, we got to wrap up because we got to get prepared for our 9 o'clock book chat with Adib Khorram. So thank you so much, Meredith, for hanging out with us and chatting with us this evening.
Good luck, really teens. I hope that you escape. I hope that you escape the librarian's vile clutches, but I hope that I was entertaining for the duration of your captivity.
Well, so also I want to remind the teens that we are giving away a copy of all of the books from the author chats this evening. So don't forget to fill out the giveaway form so that you can be entered to win that book. And then we have plenty other giveaways.
Good luck.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
Do I hang up? I don't know how to do computers.
I got to. Okay, here we go.
Okay. All right.